the end of July and the first 4 Sundays of August are what we commonly refer to as the Bread of Life section of our lectionary. Um, it begins with the feeding of the 5,000, and all 5 Sundays are coming from John's Gospel instead of Mark's Gospel, which is the standard Gospel for year B. So we take a sort of a detour into this Bread of Life section. And we, like I say, it begins with the feeding of the 5,000, and the people want to make him king, and Jesus retreats. But then he goes to the other side of the Sea of Tiberias, and there begins a conversation about Jesus being the bread of life. I am the bread of life, and whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood will live forever. Now, those of us who are Episcopalians and Christians who understand the concept of communion, that sounds kind of okay. But for those disciples back in that day, I would imagine that sounded pretty odd when Jesus refers to himself as the bread of life. I can't help but be reminded of the prayer book's explanation of sacraments, where it says a sacrament is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace given by Christ as sure and certain means of that grace. So the outward and visible signs, bread and wine, are the signs of the body and blood of Christ. But the sustenance that we received is not the bread, not the wine, but it is the actual essence of Christ himself that dwells within us, given by Christ as an outward, as a sure and certain means of grace. So we receive grace by virtue of the sacrament of Holy Communion. That's the promise of the sacramental life, that we receive grace, that we are given an extra shot of grace, so to speak, and lifted up. So the idea of Jesus being bread of life, that means Jesus is nourishment. Jesus is nourishing our hearts and our souls, and nourishing our hearts and our souls by virtue of his very self dwelling within us, living in us, dwelling in us. And there is a means by which we can see an outward and visible sign of that Jesus coming into us and living within us. Um, when I talk to kids about communion, it's has to be simple because we want to we can only go on their level. So on their level, it's um, just basically saying that when we receive communion, that means that Jesus lives inside of me, and we're asking Jesus to live inside of us, and we're receiving Jesus inside of us, and then we thank Jesus for living inside of us. But of course, when as adults, Jesus living inside of us is more than just that. It is also a sense of a means by which we're nourished, and therefore a means by which we're called to grow in faith. So the sacrament of Holy Communion is a means by which we're to be growing deeper in our faith. We're nourished, we're satiated, we're satisfied, we're filled, and then as a result of that filling, our souls, our hearts and our souls grow in love. So Jesus as the bread of life is an image that's helpful if we kind of think about it again and again and again. Bread being the food that sustains us. So if Jesus is the bread of life, then Jesus is the food that sustains us and allows us to live lives that are full of God and full of love and full of care for neighbor. So may we continue to see ways in which Christ comes and lives inside of us each time we receive the Eucharist, each time we're nourished by the body and blood of Christ. And take that nourishment and allow it to grow within us for the purpose of then blooming and taking the fruit of love out into the world. Blessings to you all. We will continue to keep you updated on mask or no mask as the numbers change. Hopefully, we'll be back soon without masks if the numbers begin to drop. So, blessings to you all. Thank you for your patience, and we'll see you on Sunday.